Hi there, and welcome to the Cotswold Explorer. I'm Robin Shuckburgh, and we're exploring the wonderful region of the Cotswolds in southwest England. For the last couple of years, we've been following in the footsteps of Herbert Evans, who wrote this wonderful book, Highways and Byways in Oxford and the Cotswolds, in 1905. And today you find Ross, Widget, Gizmo and me in the two little villages of Tadmarton, Upper and Lower Tadmarton. We're quite close to Banbury. It's that part of the world, so the stone from which the buildings are all built is this orangey, glowing kind of stone. It's very beautiful. There have been settlements here since the Iron Age. We are surrounded by evidence of Iron Age settlements on all the little hills around here. And this village has grown up through it. It's full of fascinating stuff. Come with me and I'll show you around. Both Tadmarton villages still retain much of their 16th and 17th century regional character. For many of the 26 houses listed for the hearth tax of 1665 still survive. Most are two-storied structures of ironstone rubble, and many have stone or later brick chimney stacks with casement windows and thatched roofs. Some houses have large projecting bread ovens or staircases, very unusual. Several red brick cottages with roofs of Welsh slate were put up in the 19th century and later, and there's been lots of 20th century building in a sort of yellowish brick in the main street and at the Banbury end. The Manor House, now used as a farmhouse, never had a resident lord and was probably always leased. In 1665 it was a house with 3 hearths, when there were 2 houses in the village assessed for the hearth tax on 3 hearths, both lived in by men called Robert Pargeter, so the odds are that one of them was the tenant. The present house is mainly early 18th century, when one wing was probably remodelled and the other new built, but in a traditional late 17th century style. The stone and thatched barn belonging to this house is certainly the oldest building in the village, and must have been built by Abingdon Abbey, to whom the estate was granted in the 10th century. With its arched, braced tie beams, it is similar to the New College 14th century barn at Swalcliffe, which some of you will remember we visited last year, but its character and workmanship is more modest, and it is thought to be rather later in date. The Old Rectory, now called the Grange, was by far the largest house in Tadmarton in 1665, when it was assessed on 8 hearths, recorded as in very bad shape indeed in 1802, and it was rebuilt in 1842, and later described as a handsome and modern structure. Nevertheless, it retains much of the earlier house at the back. Both parts are built of ironstone. The roof of the older part was stone slated, while the new house was roofed with Welsh slates. A sundial on the stabling is dated slightly unintelligibly in the late 1740s. This area was settled extremely early. An Iron Age camp lies about 1.5 miles southwest of the village, and a couple of miles from Madmarston Camp, which is just outside the parish boundary. 2 burial barrows, once to be found on the heath northwest of Tadmarton Camp, have been totally destroyed by the plough. East of the centre of the camp was a medieval well, known as Holy Well. Human remains, a spearhead and Roman coins have been found nearby, and a spring rises on the hillside there and runs into Lower Tadmarton. In the 20th century, part of the heath was made into a golf course, and Holywell Farm, dated 1783, has become the clubhouse. The chief road in the parish connects Swalcliffe with Bloxham and runs through Upper Tadmarton. Lower Tadmarton lies at the junction of this road with a road from Wigington, which follows the line of a prehistoric track going all the way from the Cotswolds through Tadmarton Camp to Northampton. Until well into the 19th century, this route was used by Welsh drovers who could travel for over 100 miles without going through a toll gate. The earliest evidence for the existence of a church in Tadmarton is the early Norman work in the church building itself. The Church of St. Nicholas comprises a nave and chancel, both with north aisles and a western tower. The original 12th century church was on the same plan, except that there's no evidence of a tower. Of the original building there remains the north nave arcade, some blocked arches on the north side of the chancel, and the internal jambs of a low-side window on the south side. The church was enlarged in the 13th century. An early English chancel arch was inserted within the Romanesque one. The chancel was largely rebuilt, and the nave aisle was rebuilt on a larger scale. The nave of 3 bays was lengthened to the westward by the addition of a narrow arch to the nave arcade, and of course the existing tower was built. At a later date, new windows were inserted in the walls, those in the chancel are the earliest, being in the transitional style between late decorated and perpendicular, and the rest are perpendicular. The walls of the nave were raised and clerestory windows were inserted in the south wall. Low-pitched roofs to the nave and aisle were built, and the upper stage of the tower was added. It's clear to see that the original belfry windows were blocked up. Interestingly, both the clerestory and the top section of the tower were built of ashlar or cut stone, which suggests a greater access to money than heretofore. Subsequently, no major structural changes appear to have been made before a major restoration of 1893. A report on the church in 1867 stated that it much needed the work of the diocesan architect. But it was not until 1891, when the church had sadly fallen into decay, that plans were made for a general restoration. The architects were Milne and Hall of London, the builder a J.S. Kimberley of Banbury, and it was proposed to restore the roofs of the nave and the north aisle, provide new floors and staircase in the tower, remove the west gallery, open up the tower arch, make a new vestry in the tower, repair the mullions of the nave window which had subsided, remove all the interior plaster and add a new door to the principal entrance. The pews, of which some high deal ones reached halfway up the chancel, were to be removed and replaced with chairs. All this work was carried out in 1893. When the plaster was stripped from the chancel, the original Romanesque arches were exposed. Eventually, electricity was installed in the church in 1916. The 13th century font, with its fascinating row of grotesque heads, remains. An aumbry, a type of cupboard or cabinet used in medieval times to store valuables such as religious objects, important documents or personal items, was placed in the east wall of the chancel in 1947. There is a communion table of 1635. The pulpit, lectern, prayer desk and pews date from the 19th century, but some carved bench ends of late medieval date were preserved. The back of the bench just inside the north door is the base of the former rood screen, intricately carved and well worth saving. The remains of the staircase to said rood loft can be seen in the northeast corner of the nave, and another, less easily identified set of stairs can be seen beside the north door, hiding behind a lovely little oak door clearly designed for little people. This is an interesting and strangely satisfying church to explore. We've enjoyed ourselves here. Of course, that could have something to do with our having been kept away from our favourite occupation for the last few months. It's really good to be back. I hope you've enjoyed our little trip round the two Tadmarton settlements on this windy day when it really should be summer, but it doesn't feel that way. It is fascinating, and we can see quite clearly the juxtaposition between ancient settlement and new, because there's a lot of building around here that took place in the 20th century. We've enjoyed it very much. I hope you have. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Press the little bell button so that we can let you know whenever we put stuff up. And we'll see you again very soon, somewhere else in the Cotswolds.